Hey, everybody. Well, it's Sunday, 2 days after the conference ended, but there was a bit of a development today. So I wanted to get part of the gang back together. We have Dr. John Capece and Val Holly Frank, our 19-year-old team member, talking about what did happen today. So, ladies and gentlemen, there was a glimmer of good news today. Um, all week long, we've been hearing from the conference day after day, press releases with recommendations, with guidelines, with protocols, with advisories. Day after day, they were wearing us down. No concrete deals signed. So finally, it looks as though there was a little bit of a breakthrough. And I was beginning to feel like we were the knight in the Monty Python show. They keep getting our limbs whacked off, and he kept saying, "I'm fine, I'm fine." But we weren't fine. I mean, we were on life support. We're still on life support. But John, tell us what did happen today and your thoughts about that.
Well, it appeared to have happened in effect last night with them announcing at what was it 3 a.m. the final plenary session, and I left. Valhalla and I went there yesterday and tried to get into some of these meetings, but they were not admitting observers into the meeting. I imagine, I know they admitted observers into the plenary session at 3 a.m., but we had left by then. I wandered out of the venue at about 9 p.m. and wandered by the room where they were working, and there was a crowd of maybe 50, 75 people mulling around, a lot of journalists recording various interviews, waiting. So that means that they were waiting there for another 6 hours until there was an announcement.
Yeah.
So it was quite the marathon.
Yeah, it was a press scrum. So we knew that something was about to drop. So what did kind of happen was, all week long, and a lot of the countries, a lot of the developing countries, including 134, had basically been digging their heels in and saying, we're not going to sign other agreements. We're not going to agree to move forward with other things until loss and damage is addressed. And day after day, we knew this was the elephant in the room, and it just did not happen day after day. So there was finally a breakthrough. There was an agreement signed by almost 200 countries, and considering there's only 194 countries in the world, that's a big deal. It was basically unanimous. So it was a small step, but it was an important step nonetheless. And it goes to the root of the morality of climate justice. It basically it obligates countries to at least set up a fund to underwrite less developed countries that are suffering harm. It did not contribute to the climate crisis. So there are all kinds of caveats. We don't know all the writing yet. And I know the U.S. refused to sign until they were relieved of criminal or legal liability, so that nobody could come and sue them for the amount of fossil fuels we have emitted. And India and China, which are both considered developing countries, China was asking, they were on the side of the less developed countries saying, we need the U.S. to underwrite our damage. And China's got the second leading economy in the world. That's a bit hypocritical, in my opinion. India maybe has a better case to make. So, but nonetheless, they all got together and they agreed on this at least small step toward underwriting the disadvantaged people around the world, less developed countries. So, I mean, in my opinion, if this had happened day one instead of day 15 of a day 13 conference, we could have gotten a lot of other stuff done. So all the other stuff kind of got pushed out of the way because nobody was willing to address this. So I know, John, you're a little discouraged by the net effects of what was accomplished at COP. I know you were reading the implementation, categories, and it seems really lightweight. Any thoughts on that, John?
Well, first on the issue of the language and China, as I understood it, they nuanced the issue by evading the less developed nation sort of language and focus more on the climate vulnerable nations. And I think that was an attempt to redirect or focus more upon the small Pacific island nations rather than the large number of highly populous countries in South Asia, Southeast Asia, and throughout Africa. And then on the issue of China, we saw some of that in the sessions we attended with the World Bank, China, the USA, and the European Bank on the methane issue, where China, their opening comments was to say that, well, we're glad that the World Bank and the USA are hosting this along with the European Development Bank, since that's where the money has to come from to fund our programs on methane, which we have none as yet because it's not in our national determined contributions. So a lot of posturing going on there. And I think to a certain extent, this sort of highlights the issue of the longevity of the climate crisis and how it's evolved over the past 27 years, with China involved initially as an underdeveloped nation with a much smaller cumulative and annual greenhouse gas emissions total. So over this past 27 years, they've gone from an underdeveloped nation to a highly developed nation, and one that is now the second largest contributor cumulatively and first largest contributor annually to the greenhouse gas emissions. So it demonstrates the long arc of these negotiations, how things have dramatically changed on how much is being contributed and by whom. The problem is just getting worse and worse. And then some of the nations like China still expecting to receive money from the Western nations, or can't even say the developed nations now, to underwrite what is in fact their fossil fuel boom.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that was a reach. When they're asking for a handout from Europe and from America to finance their developing status. Valhalla, I know you spent a lot of time over the conference with young people, with indigenous peoples. You got any buzz on how people are reacting to the bit of loss and damage news that we heard today?
Nothing much yet. Definitely a lot of weary people. Very worried that nothing much is going to come from it. And hopefully something does. But I think young people and indigenous people alike are used to things getting screwed up, and especially getting screwed over by a lot of these policies, like that $1.7 billion pledge, where only 19% of those funds were allocated since last year, and only 7% actually reached communities, indigenous communities. So definitely not much hope, but if this is implemented in an actual way, it would be amazing. And of course, people want that to happen, but they're hesitant now.
Yeah, they're skeptical, and rightly so. I mean, if this thing had happened earlier in the week, I think we would have been able to address fossil fuel reduction. And I was amazed to hear that fossil fuel, the words fossil fuel, only appeared in COP27 documents, anywhere in COP27 official documents, for the first time last year. It had never appeared in print in the COP documents since 1995. So they finally addressed coal, which is an egregious emitter of greenhouse gases. And they finally, after a lot of dickering, on the Sunday, 2 days after the conference ended, similar to this year, agreed to a phase down instead of a phase out of coal. They were trying to get to that same agreement this year on fossil fuels, on oil and gas. They could not get there, partly because the works were so gummed up with this discussion of loss and damage. And I was amazed to hear that here's a case in point of why we need to address fossil fuel and greenhouse gases. On the 7th of November, the day after the conference started, there was a leak in Western Pennsylvania. So they've been fracking in Western Pennsylvania, as we know, and they've been converting that into gas, and they've been injecting the gas into deep well injection reservoirs. And one of these reservoirs started to leak on day 2 of the conference, and it was leaking 100 million cubic feet per day. So by the end of today, 10 days later, it had leaked 1 billion cubic feet of methane into the air. They can't stop it. And the hissing is apparently so loud that people 3 miles away can't sleep. It's hissing so loud 24 hours a day that it's interfering with people's sleep, and it's everywhere, and they can smell it because they add an ingredient. Methane is odorless, and you can't see it, but they add an element. It tastes a little bit or smells a little like sulfur. So there's sulfur all over this region for 4 or 5 square miles, and they have not been able to cap it. And that's the equivalent of 1,000 train stock cars loaded with coal burned. So this happened this week. If we had been able to either track it with that Mars program that they don't need to track it. Everybody knows it's there. But this is the reason why we should have attacked fossil fuels instead of spending the whole week mired in this discussion of loss and damage. We should have tried to get it done from the head of the conference. And I do blame the organizers. I mean, their job is to rule the unruly. That's their job. That's a tough assignment, but that's their job. And they could not get consensus. And we suffered through 13 days of basically blah, blah, blah. And finally, dragged something over the finish line on day 15. So it's better than nothing, but it's pretty discouraging in general. Yeah, John, any I know you have a thought or two.
You mentioned the implementation plan, and I think it's worth taking a look at it, what it actually says here.
Yeah.
It's quite the embarrassment, in my opinion. I mean, when you look at each paragraph, it starts out reaffirming, also reaffirming, noting, also noting, acknowledging. Then you can go pages down, and it just continues to that. Recognizing, also recognizing, calls upon, reiterates, emphasizes. These are not terms like agrees to, commits to. These are all wiggle words and a lot of nothing, simply to take up page space and have something to announce.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wanted to get back on the air basically to announce this because it's at least something, and I wanted to bring that to people's attention because all week we've been saying nothing happened. A lot of great discussions, a lot of exchange of information, intelligence, basically a trade fair, more than a conference where agreements are signed. So at least this was something, so I wanted to at least communicate that news. So you are basically not holding your breath, Valali, in terms of what the upper echelons, the delegates, are going to deliver, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, how often do we see major climate action, especially from high-level organizations and governments? So hopefully all those fancy words that they're using in those documents actually lead to something. But as John was stating, it just sounds like filler. Yeah.
John, any parting words?
I think that this conference could be characterized as kicking the can down the road.
Yeah. We don't have a lot of road. I mean, the road ends at a cliff, and it's within sight. So I'm taking it as a little bit of a win. I got my celebratory jacket on. I got my hand-tooled Seminole silver dollars. I got my gift bracelet from Houston Cypress from the Miccosukee tribe. So I'm gonna take the win, and I hope that we charge forward. We got to keep everybody accountable. and hold them to the promises and try to get something going, because there's just no alternative. And we can't, as Rock was saying yesterday, you can't succumb. You can't give up. You gotta bear down and just double down on everything, because there's too much inertia out there. So thanks. I know you guys are basically trying to have a little downtime now that the conference is over. You might be headed for Giza. So thanks for jumping in, kind of just to do this little last minute recap. So thanks a lot.
Sure. Thank you, Casey.
Okay. Take care, guys. And to sign off tonight, we're going to have Michal Fidler's last day of the conference. We couldn't get it into Friday's show, so I want you all to see that tonight. Thanks a lot, folks, and we will see you next year.
Good evening, everyone. Let me present you with my last set of narrated photos from COP27. Here is the first image of the day, and it shows that COP is basically ending. Many the pavilion rooms were completely empty. Some of them had this caution tape or do not enter barrier. Another example of a completely empty pavilion. Here an example of a pavilion which is about to be dismantled. Here this pavilion of Indonesia was already partly dismantled. So when we got there in the morning with Dr. Capece and we were walking around, we did not really see much of any happening there. But then we walked to the Japanese pavilion, and as John was looking at this booth, he was immediately approached by one of the engineers, and he was ready to provide an explanation of what was displayed there. The other scientist on this booth was taking some notes of what was being discussed. He also took contacts about the Florida media group, because he was interested in some of the images I was taking there. So Japan did not take a day off today at all. They actually had a program till 6:30 p.m. John kept discussing stuff with the Japanese scientists, so I walked around, looked in some of the pavilions which were not closed. One of them was the Mediterranean pavilion, and also there was some discussion going on. There were 3 panelists and exactly one person watching this specific session. Another pavilion which had some content was this one, but the discussion was about where do we go from here, how do we head towards COP28. Not much interesting stuff there. So I walked around, took a few more images, and this would be probably my take of what was happening in the pavilions area today. Then I moved towards the plenary sessions, towards the plenary area, and it was a completely different story. It was busy as never. I have not seen there so many people in quite a while. I of course wanted to get into one of the plenaries, but it was not open for media at all. I could not get in, so my badge is not a magic that can get me anywhere. We had to stay outside of the plenaries, and here will be one of the journalists delivering her report, standing in front of the plenary. But my badge gets me into the press conferences rooms, and I think this was a very good press conference to attend. The gentleman on the right is the special representative of the COP27 president, and his face says it all, because when he was asked, so have we made any progress? Will there be any progress? Will we deliver something at this COP? The face says it all. I have hardly any hopes after seeing this image. The area between the plenaries and between the pavilions was filled up with some protesters, but it was very small and silent protest. There were just some banners put there, but that was about it. There were a few students doing small interviews and taking images, but nothing was really happening there. It was also under a close eye of the security and the Egypt security and the UN security, so very small and very silent protest there. During the day, I was approached several times by various people. They were asking me if I could take an image of them so they can have it as a souvenir that they bring back home. I did that and also decided to take images of our team members so you get an idea who we are reporting for you from Egypt. So this would be Dr. Capece, and this image shows how much space he gives me for taking images of him. He simply either discuss stuff with somebody or he's sitting in the IT center working on his computer. So it took a lot of effort and begging to get him somewhere where he would pose for me and I could take image like that. It's a completely different story with Esteban, another member of our team, because Esteban is really a good material to work with when it comes to photographing. When I ask him, please stand here and smile, he does that. When I ask him, stand here and smile, he does that. I ask him, can you give me the Obama face? He does that, no problems at all. So Esteban, thank you for this. With Valholi, another another member of our team, it's a different story. We waited here maybe 20 minutes for the stage to be emptied, and finally we could get there and I could take images there. And she was giving me faces like that. Very hard to persuade her to please give me a serious face, but eventually we end up with images like that. I'm fairly happy with. If you just notice in the left bottom corner, it used to say Sharm el Sheikh. Now the S disappeared. I don't know if somebody took it down or it was how it disappeared, but it's not there. And now the name of the city here is Sharm el Sheikh. Maybe that tells a bit of the story as well. Yet another member of our team is Jeff. He has joined us only for week 2, and it's so much fun to be around Jeff. He has a special gift. He attracts people and they talk to him. They like to take photos with him. So these Egyptian kids were after him right away. This area which the kids where the kids were working, they were providing coffee, but they were closed. But we took photos of them, no problem. We could get the free coffee there right away. But in Egypt, nothing is really for free, so I had to take images of all the kids one by one, and I will still need to send them to them. Here in this image, you would see me. Yeah, it's not the guy on the right hand side, it's the one in the background with the camera and in his face. That would be me. So I show this image to John because he asked me to take few images of myself. He was not happy with this image at all. I gave him my camera today and asked him, all right, do few images of me. So we have them in the bag. These are the images John delivered me at first. For some reason he was just pushing the button, pointing the wrong way. It took an effort to get images like that, but finally here is an image of me doing my job here at COP. Almost the last image of the day is this one. I think it's the image which might be a symbol of this year COP. If you compare the left hand side of the left part of the image and the right side, I think this image tells the story of this year's COP. But I don't want to end with some negative or sad note, so let me just include this very last image from this year's COP. It's our team here on the ground in Sharm el Sheikh. It has been a lot of fun and a pleasure to work with this team, and same with UKC. So with being this said and shown, I am turning it back to you.